Lemonade Originals.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Lemonade's Driving Brand Growth Podcast. I'm your host, Trevor Dudek. And today we have a great episode packaged up for you with Anton Borkel, the Riot Games principal marketing creative director in charge of things such as League of Legends and a host of other great topics that we discussed today on the podcast. Actually, this was filmed last year, but we packaged it up for you today. And there's some great content in a nice bite-sized 26-minute episode for you. So please enjoy, and we'll see you again soon. Anton, how you doing?
Doing good. Mic check. Can you hear me all right?
Absolutely. Whereabouts are you in the world?
I am in usually beautiful sunny Los Angeles. But as it gets a little bit more wintertime, I guess you do get some clouds. It is a little bit chilly outside, but I couldn't tell if you were like in the coast of like Costa Rica there, or if you were in LA. Oh, I wish.
It just looked tropical behind you. But yeah, I'm assuming you guys have been busy, as most of our gaming clients have been.
Yes. The short answer is yes. I would always argue too busy, because I think if you look at the track record of the company, we are one of the companies that largely survived on, hopefully doing a good enough job on, one particular game, one particular franchise. And then right when we, as a company flipped the switch to what else can we do? Now this stuff happens. So delivering, this amount of content, and then plus for all the teams who also delivering new games into the market. Anyone who has ever launched a game, I think, will say this is usually the most stressful thing you can do in games. I would argue that is not different for publishing. But then launching games during times like these, right? I remember the more, you have the traditional kind of like war rooms, and now all of these are kind of like virtual. So it's interesting because I think you're going technically through the same experience, and luckily for us, I think we were able to manage. But it depends on, I don't know, so many heroic moments of so many like individuals for usually these things to then eventually come together. And it feels weird to not being able to like, high five people or like directly celebrate with each other, right? When you're used to working in the trenches together. I don't know.
Yeah. After you go through, pulling long hours and figuring out hard challenges, and you want to have those celebratory moments. And, we've always found ourselves like as an agency, like oftentimes forgetting to do those celebrations, like COVID aside, but then this just makes it worse. You know what I mean? Like, and then we've got some good people on our team who are like the cheerleaders who are like, hey guys, like, let's celebrate that win, like just take a minute, let's hop on and share a drink on Zoom or something. Like we gotta find those moments to just like connect as human beings.
Has it been because I would assume you guys also have onboarded people during the crisis. Yeah. For me, it's interesting because initially I thought, I know I've worked at the company for 5 years. I know a lot of the people very closely that I work with, so it doesn't feel like as much of a challenge for me personally, because I think if you have established relationships, it's a little bit easier to understand tone and mannerisms over the hangouts. But I really felt for the people that we onboarded during this time, right? That have to build all of these things kind of like remote. So I assume that's also as tricky in your field.
Yeah, I think you're right, though. I think it's maybe easier for us and harder for an employee, making the decision about like, is this the right culture? Is this the right fit? Mm-hmm. I mean, we're judging for those things as well, but we're also just kind of like, well, can they do the work? Do we think they fit these things? And then we can also like try people out at an agency. We can always do kind of like contract-based stuff first. And that's really been our solve and kind of our approach now. is just like anything we do is let's try this out for a month or 2 or 3 on a contract level. Make sure it's a fit for us, but for you too, because it's so hard to know. It's not as simple as just, can you do the job or do the work? There's other things at play. And then after we get those good fuzzy feelings, then we can convert it to full time. So
it's tricky, because I feel sometimes working on the services side, on the agency side, is obviously considered, I think, by most accounts, probably stressful.
Yeah.
Similar working in video games, I think, sometimes can be a lot of hard work. And I think what makes it still connect a lot of times with people is like the emotional resonance that you get from the audience, that you're working in a field that you love. Ideally you're working on a project you really care about. Sometimes you even want to play it yourself, right? You're like
absolutely
in love with your own creation. And I feel like sometimes if you don't feel like you work in video games, working in video games is much less cool, right? If you work remotely, if you're a little bit more detached from the buzzing of the floor, right, where the product gets created, working closely with the product folks, you can go over and see, the latest character that folks are working on. You get excited about it because it plays in the position that you like to play and so on. Or I fell in love with the company when I was brought into my first World's Finals in 2015, right? So when you have an experience like that, when it's kind of like, seeing LeBron James live for the first time, it's like, oh shit, I should pay more attention to this team, to this sport, to this company.
Yeah, that's a good example, right? Like seeing a sport up close and personal makes you like appreciate it more.
You understand the
commitment that they have.
Yeah. It's just like a different level of understanding, I guess you get for it. Yeah.
And appreciation, right? I mean, it's so easy to kind of like cast judgment on anything, but like with sports, like, they're high paid athletes, so, they're just playing a game, but, they dedicate their lives, their body, and then you go to a game or you see sort of what goes into actually achieving it. I mean, I'm a baseball fan more than anything. And I mean, they play like 160 games a year, like it's fucking insane, right? I mean, that's half the year. It's crazy.
It's an absurd amount of time, yeah.
And they're doing like, if you have like an extra inning game, you're turning around the next day and just playing another like 10 hours. It's just crazy.
One of the, I think I wasn't heavily into eSports before joining Riot, but one of the kind of like switches that clicked for me was growing up in Germany. Obviously you kind of have to be a soccer fan to some extent, and then I was always like a fan of the NBA even before coming to LA. So I think I understood the amount of commitment it takes for physical sports. But even if you're like a pro athlete, you're probably not going to train more than 2-3 hours a day, right? Because your body's like you're going to the point of exhaustion. Then like if you go over it, you kind of like break something. For pro players, in order to stay competitive, they grind like 10 hours a day.
Yeah.
And that level of capacity for training and endurance is just something that I completely underestimated. And seeing that up close, and then also being able to play the game myself, it felt exactly like playing table tennis and then seeing the pros next to you. It's like, that's a different sport. What are you? I technically have the same racket or whatever that these people are using, and
how do you make it do that?
Right? It feels like a different sport, and in esports, I think it's if you don't fully understand the mechanics of the game, or if you don't understand the in and outs, you don't understand what macro clicks per second or all of these terms mean, and you also don't understand the complexity, like how many decisions these pros are going through every nanosecond. But if you look at something like chess, because we recently finished Queen's Gambit.
Queen's Gambit. Oh, so yeah,
beautiful, right?
I have one episode left.
I'm not going to spoil it.
But I don't play chess, but I've always been super interested in it. But it's crazy how much that's brought everybody into chess.
Yeah, because I think being immersed in that world and into the game and into the making the training, the grind to some extent cinematic and relatable to people, I think inspires that, right? And I think we are just over the last couple of years starting to get that more across in esports, where I feel like the more people understand the in and outs of the game, the more you kind of like are in awe of the performance, right, of these pro athletes. And if you take something like chess, just imagine you're not playing one game of chess, but you're playing 5.
My gosh.
And it's definitely the speed version of chess, and then it's also a team sport. So you're playing together with 5 people. You have like different roles, and you have to make these kind of like decisions every nanosecond. And it's based on an endless amount of combinations with. Chess, you have like a limited amount of pieces, and just in League of Legends, you have 150 characters that all have like, you multiply that by the different abilities, then you multiply that by the different cooldown times, etc. So I think once people get more immersed into the in and outs, they understand the level of
strategy involved.
Yeah, it's just maddening if you think about it.
Yeah, and that's what's great about chess in general, right? But how Queen's Gambit breaks it down, where it's like she's trying to play the game before she plays the game, right? So in her head, she's trying to see every move. And I feel like that's, when you hear like a all-star athlete talk about playing a sport, they say the same thing, right? And I was recently talking to someone, and I was kind of analogizing it similarly to like just from like a mental sort of approach that they take, similar to like a doctor, like a brain surgeon level or a heart surgeon level, where it's like, because people sometimes meet people like that, and I have, and you think if you just talk to them briefly, sometimes people like that can come off a little short, or a little arrogant, same as like a pro player, right? But
sure,
you almost have to be, like to have the cojones, right. man or woman, like just using that term, like to describe like the raw like guts and intensity to be able to, jump into someone's body and fix something, or to walk onto a court and know like, right, I'm going to win. I had a great boss who used to tell me, he's like, do you think a basketball player starts the game thinking he's going to lose? Like, no one starts the game thinking they're going to lose. These guys go in thinking they're going to win every time. And, similar to, yeah, exactly. Similar to what you're saying about esports or, competitively gaming, like you have to see those openings and see those strategic moves and understand that you're going to win, and then you can win. And then you might not, but you have to go into it that way, right?
I think so. But the brain surgeon example is interesting because, of course, it's rocket science. It's like
rocket science. Yeah, I mean, tell me if you disagree, but I don't know.
No, absolutely. The amount of like complexity, and I think also the weight of the responsibility is immense. What I think Queen's Gambit also added as like maybe an element that people previously about chess underestimated is the psychology, right? Understanding your opponent. It's almost like you're playing a game of chess, yes, but you're also playing a game of poker on top of it, where you're constantly trying to analyze the opponent. And another thing that I liked about the show is that once you reach a certain level, you're only interested in the top 1%. I think what you are saying is part of like arrogance. I think it's also partially due to these people understand that at their level, LeBron James doesn't need to, be concerned with like all of the leagues. He only cares about
like a little pickup game is no longer is no longer interesting.
It's
right,
recreational for him, right? He's not gonna go out there 82 games a season. He's planning for, I don't know, the 30 games that he feels like he has to win. And I think what the show also did is this kind of like, if you understand that you are already at the top in your immediate vicinity, then you need to expand upon, right? It's like, okay, in the US here, there's nothing that can beat me. And rather than saying like, oh, that's pretty cool as a woman, especially during that time, that should be, should be time to high five. It's like, okay, how can I get to Russia, right? How can I play like the real gods of the sport? How can I beat my icons? And I think that's that's fascinating. This never stop, never settle attitude that even though if you haven't been around during that era, you don't play chess, I think is something that rings true no matter, what sport you're interested in or follow.
Yeah, I think that's something I appreciate about anything that's competitive. Like, I think they just put breakdancing into the Olympics. I saw that like yesterday. Like it just got announced. Like whatever your fancy is, right? Like it seems to me whenever you really hear someone talk, whether it's athlete or whatever we're talking about, who's like a genuine competitor, they do want to play the best. That because even if they lose, they want to lose to the best. They win, they want to win to the best. They want to excel within the best pieces or parts of their field. And I'm sure that as like game creators, like you want to also think that way, right? Like you want to be making the kind of best environment for people to experience these worlds and to kind of immerse themselves and take themselves away from whatever it is they want to escape from, and dive into. Like there's so many cool connections there if you really think about that.
It's certainly our ambition. I think
what drives you? Yeah, that's kind of where I'm going. Yeah, it's like, what is there a North Star when you guys are creating something?
I mean, for some stuff, I would say so, yes. But then for other stuff, we also allow the creative spark maybe to drive, ideally, some of that. Kind of like not necessarily knowing what the exact end result might look like, but you can just sense like the potential of a direction of an idea. From the game side, I think one thing that I like about how Riot is thinking about marketing that usually it's not as positive for people like myself who do work in marketing, that we're definitely a product-driven organization, right? So a lot of the decisions that we're making are based on product cadence, for example, product direction. We do suffer of being a little bit further down the food chain when it comes to flow of information, dependencies, and all that kind of stuff. But I think what it gives us is a deeper, ideally more meaningful connection by the experiences that we build around the game, that it actually feels, more in line or closer to what players think the game is. To me, that's one of our, ideally secrets to success, I guess. So we're always thinking about, from a player perspective, what would I want to see? What would I like to have happen? And then also, obviously, we're listening a lot to what players are saying, and we sometimes even revert decisions if we feel like we missed the mark. But our ideal scenario is actually giving players something that they don't even know they want, right? I think both from a gameplay perspective, and I'm obviously very little involved in that side of things, but mostly in the experiences that we're trying to craft around it. Ideally, finding ways to enhance and enrich our players' perception of the IP, and then also just like building fun experiences around it, right? Technically, I work in marketing, but one of our core philosophies that we're trying to pursue over the years is that it ideally rarely feels like marketing, right? I, for example, tell all of the creators I work with, we don't put pre-order now on the back of our videos, right? It's like, if you mean the philosophy, right? If you follow it down to the conclusion, it means making certain creative calls on certain assets like that. And when we do create marketing content, we still have to obviously drive business objectives ultimately. But the way ideally we're trying to get players excited about it is if it's presented in a way, if it feels to them like just an experience, right? Less ideally like a marketing campaign that they now have to follow. And even if you look at other sides of the business, something like eSports, it's not because it has been the biggest revenue driver in the past in the industry, right? I think eSports is still definitely on the climb to an even higher mountain. But I think what it drives is it's building a larger experience and identity and community around these games that wasn't really possible only a few years ago. And I think all of that kind of combined makes what players feel a game is, right? It goes beyond the core-to-core gameplay dynamics when you're talking about games of a certain size, like Fortnite, for example.
Yeah, and absolutely, I agree with that. Is there is there certain ways that because you head up the creative team, right? Just
there are lots of creative teams at Riot.
Okay, so just describe for me a little bit, like kind of how you envision your role or your responsibility.
So right now I'm working on most of the campaigns that are being released in and around League of Legends. That is the core PC game, and I also recently worked on Wild Rift, which is essentially League of Legends for mobile devices.
Yeah.
So if you think about all kinds of experiences that are in and around that, it's all kinds of campaign, new characters, little events that we launch during the year. That's where I get most invested in, and then based on how important League of Legends is in other moments, for example, a big one is Worlds, and then you kind of get a seat at the table, so to speak. But all of our campaigns, even the ones that I work directly on, usually have people besides myself that are doing most of the genius creative work, I would argue. So it's definitely a very, very large team effort. And we're trying also to get better at maybe merging some of these more traditionally more isolated teams. Because what we learned over the years is that, players don't know which team is working on what. And, they don't necessarily care.
No.
So if we are internally arguing, it's like, well, this team has more time for X, this team has more budget for Y or something. We are, or at least I think, ideally we always argue from the players don't know that, and we shouldn't.
They just want what they want. They want the best experience. They want whatever is next,
Exactly. So ideally crafting workflows that kind of like mirror that experience, and that we're able to make the best possible decisions on how the players ultimately will go through those type of experiences. So the lines definitely tend to blur the larger the events get, I guess.
I think that's a good thing though. How would you characterize like your marketing strategy? Is it like, I feel like this goes through different phases, but sometimes it can be more like, depending on the year or the quarter, can be more focused on community development. Sometimes it can be more focused on just straight UA. Sometimes it can be more focused on, creating just kind of a new narrative.
Right.
Like at the moment, what's kind of key for you guys?
The stuff that I can talk about is that on the position that I'm currently working in, thankfully allows me to think a little bit about all of those things, kind of like in combination. So one of my big focus areas is, if we combine all of the different teams and campaigns effort that might have, a little bit more focused goals, similar to the stuff that you're outlining. If we add all of these together throughout the year, are we League of Legends, right? If we combine all of these elements, do we represent what we believe is the core DNA, what we want to say about League of Legends in, 2020, 2021, and so on, which is actually not as easy as you might think in working on Wild Rift, because it's a new game. It's a little bit easier to define from the get-go who you are, what you're trying to say.
It's hard to go back with an established property. Yeah.
And it's also quite large, right? It's very, very organic. The way League grew is largely word of mouth traditionally.
Well, and at the end of the day, the brand really belongs to the gamer. Like it may be owned by you, but it really belongs to them, and sort of how they take on the life of it after you've put it out into the world.
Absolutely. Right? I don't want to dodge your question entirely, though. I think there's a couple of things that, no matter what the specific situation is in any given quarter or any given year, there are certain creative philosophies that we're really trying to establish all across the company. One of them would be surprise and delight. So ideally delivering on what players want us to do, right? Bringing KDA back, for example, is one of those things where we kind of know that players want more of a certain thing. because they tell us. But we also want to make sure that we don't become predictable, right? Both in the type of content that we deliver, in the cadence of content, and how we deliver, and also ideally breaking new ground. And even potentially, we had some failures in the past because maybe the timing wasn't right or we didn't find the right approach. Sometimes it's worth revisiting ideas that we felt maybe we approached this the wrong way, and we still believe in the core DNA of something that didn't work at the time. So ideally, kind of like still at the end of the day, it all adds up into player trust, right? That the players feel like no matter what Riot does, A, it's going to be hopefully cool. B, it's going to be hopefully to quality. And C, even if it, that's one of my big ambitions, even if a certain product or a certain game is not for you, you still have the takeaway that I'm happy that Riot did X. Or even if the game isn't meant for me, I know a friend that I would, recommend this to because I know that, Riot will deliver quality ideally.
As long as you're not ending up on, in the community chatter in the wrong way, that's what matters.
Right.
Yeah. No, I think there's oftentimes great ways to establish that you've done something new and cool, and it's not for everybody, but as long as you can appreciate it and whatever you want as a fan, as a player is still there, and you're surprising and delighting. I think that's a great North Star. Absolutely.
The same thing is, how I think about the industry as a player. I think about it the same way Nintendo, right? I've never owned a Wii. I think those controllers were stupid the first time came out, but I know and appreciate what they're doing to the industry, right? They're expanding the market. They make my parents be interested in video games.
Right.
And they're making the game's kind of like ratings understandable to a much younger generation of new gamers. They put art style, for example, very high up rather than just high fidelity, right? They're doing so many things that professionally I can appreciate, and as a gamer I can root for, even if a particular product or the latest Mario game may not be for me personally, right? I'm pre-ordering Cyberpunk because I know that is more my jam, but I still can root for the continued existence and success of a company doing a lot of things the right way, ideally. But yeah, very happy to chat about the industry. Such a pleasure.
Yeah, this was great, bud.
Thank you very much.
All right, buddy. Thanks.
Lemonade Original.